Good evening and welcome to episode 27 of the Jacksonian. As I have with me is the host from Big Banter Sports, the Big Ten Huddle, JR, as we'll be discussing as to whether the Ohio State Buckeyes football team is going all in for 2024. We go over the chaotic, disastrous situation over at UCLA, the Big Ten Bubble Watch. Who was the best and worst hires Big Ten football this year? Who's on the hot seat? Big Ten basketball. Let me tell you, it's gonna be a wild ride, everyone. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great, Jackson. Thanks for having me here. Looking forward to getting to all the topics.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun, man. It is gonna be wild. So I tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, host of the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten over there. It's me every episode, and then I bring on insiders, fans, podcasters from all across the Big Ten. So you'll see me over there every time, and then you might see some new people, whether they're from Minnesota, Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan, whatever it might be. So you're always getting different perspectives from all kinds of different Big Ten fans, and it's a good time over there.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to seeing the USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon editions. That's gonna be fun. But
Oh yeah.
speaking of the new dogs in the Big Ten, well, Bruins, they are not doing so hot. I mean, Chip Kelly leaves for Ohio State. Now, you expect your head coach to leave for an OC position if you're like group of five, right? But we're talking about a team that's joining the Big Ten, leaving for Ohio State. I mean, like, that's cool because it's Ohio State. But if it was like Iowa, good grief, that'd be disastrous. But what's your take on this Chip Kelly hire? And I know you said something last Monday on the Ocho to John D'Animo that you were worried a little bit about the Chip Kelly working for Ryan Day because, you know, he's like the mentor working for the protege. That's like the con. But what's your take, man?
Yeah, no. I'm definitely in the minority of Ohio State fans in that area. You know, a lot of Ohio State fans, most Ohio State fans, are very happy with the hire of Chip Kelly, and I think there's a lot to be happy about. I don't not really concerned so much about Chip Kelly as a coordinator. You hit it on the head. I'm just kind of concerned about that mentor, mentee, or protege, whatever word you want to use there, relationship to where the person who is the mentor is now no longer the boss. He is now the coordinator for the mentee who is now the boss. And how is that relationship going to work out? Is it still going to be Ryan Day's team, or is it going to be kind of Chip Kelly making his own moves and doing his own things? There's talk right now that Ohio State, they have one staff member spot or one coaching spot left for the team. And there's talk, you know, are they going to hire a guy who's been a GA for them for a couple years in James Laurinaitis, a Buckeye alum, played there for a long time, went to the NFL and just recently got back into coaching? Are they going to hire him, or are they going to hire somebody from Chip Kelly's old staff, somebody who he trusts and who he likes? And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be kind of telling, because if they hire the UCLA guy, this is going to be the first sign to me that, yep, Chip Kelly's kind of getting his way and getting what he wants in this situation more than I think Ryan Day is getting what he wants in this situation. And there could be a little bit of struggle there between the two of them.
Well, I hope that works out very well for 2024 because it looks like to me they are going all in for the 2024. It's a perfect year to end that losing streak to the Wolverine.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and a lot of people are saying if Ryan Day doesn't beat the Wolverines this year, that, you know, he's going to get fired, which is crazy to think that a guy who's been at a school for, you know, what, 6, 7 years now, has lost less than 10 games overall, could possibly get fired. Like, that's just crazy to think about. But, you know, that's crazy Ohio State fans for you. I probably one of the craziest fan bases, if not the craziest fan base in the nation.
Well, there's crazy fans everywhere, but I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think there's a I don't think all Buckeyes fans are all crazy because I should know because I'm a Bama man, and you know we kind of got that bad rap from like
Yeah.
the Paul Feinbaum show, but that's how it goes sometimes. But I got a list of the first year coaches going into 2024 for the Big Ten: Kirk Sidnetti, Jerome Moore, Jonathan Smith, Deshaun Foster, the latest hire, and Jed Fish of Washington. Who's the best and who's the worst out of all?
Oh, it's so tough to answer. I know that on the Voice of College Football, Mark he said the best hire was Jonathan Smith, and I have to agree with him. I think Jonathan Smith did a spectacular job at Oregon State with what he was able to do with them. And not only was he able to come over to Michigan State, bring some players with him, brought some coaches with him as well, and poached a very good defensive coordinator from Minnesota and Joe Rossi. So you can already tell that Jonathan Smith, he's going to be one to reckon with as well. But don't sleep on Kirk Cignetti. Kirk Cignetti over at Indiana, he did a very good job at James Madison. So I wouldn't sleep on him. So this is going to make me sound like Ohio State homer, but I'm not saying he's the worst. But the potential of being the worst is probably Sharon Moore. Not so much because Sharon Moore is not a good coach. Sharon Moore did a very good job last year. But Sharon Moore is coming into a situation where he is a head coach for his very first time, and he does not have the supporting coaches around him that have been there for a while that he can kind of lean on. His entire defensive staff is gone after last year, and he's lost a couple guys on the offensive staff as well. So I'm not saying that Sharon Moore was the worst hire, but I think Sharon Moore does kind of have an uphill battle here. Thankfully, he has a lot of really good defensive players coming back. I think 8 guys who started games last year are coming back on the Michigan defense. So that's very positive for him. But it's really, really hard to start off like this when you're a first year head coach. If I had to go with the worst hire, I I think they're all good hires. I know this kind of sounds like Homer and me, but I think they're all good hires. Maybe Jed Fish, just because I think Jed Fish, kind of goes around a lot and doesn't really stay at one place. And so if you're Washington, even if he does well, he might just jump ship and go to a better job at some point.
Well, Florida is his alma mater, and it's a hot seat situation over there. So I'm kind of wondering if he's waiting it out for Florida.
Yeah, that's very possible.
And plus, there's no state taxes. I mean, that's a win for him right there.
I might move to Florida now.
Oh man, Florida, Tennessee, and Nevada are the states with no state taxes that I know of, but that's another time for another.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. But I will be honest, I think Sharon Moore is the next Ryan Day. Just think about their coaching tenures started similarly, right? Ryan Day, interim head coach. They were winning all kinds of games. They won that Oregon State TCU matchup in 2018. And then, like, Urban Meyer comes back, bam, Ryan Day's your Nets head coach. And we see Sharon Moore. We see Jim Harbaugh getting suspended. Sharon Moore beats Penn State and the Ohio State Buckeyes. And, it's pretty much known that he was going to be the Nets head man at Michigan. I think this could be like a Hollywood reboot of a 10-year war. It'll be the 10-year war 2.0.
I mean, it's very possible. Like I said, I'm not saying that Sharon Moore was the worst hire. I just look at it with the potential of he could be the absolute best hire. He could also be the worst hire. I see what you're saying with Ryan Day. The only difference I'll say is, like I talked about with the coaching situation, losing that many coaches, trying to hire in new guys. Does he actually have a relationship with these guys? Does he actually trust these guys? Or is he just going off a resume and saying, I got to hire some people for these jobs? And so I'm going to go with the guys who are most interested, who have the best resumes to be able to do it. Now, very well could be that he hires the best resume guys and everything works out. But if he hires these guys and he doesn't have, the ability to work with them very well, it might not go so well.
Well, and you touched on Kurt Sidnetti being a great hire for Indiana. I'll go as far as to say that he's the Nets Lance Leopold and Nets Matt Campbell because of the tremendous jobs they've done over at Iowa State and Kansas. I could see something like that going on at Indiana football. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps that the divisions are gone in the Big Ten, and Indiana is no longer playing Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan every single year. I think that was something that hampered and hindered them, quite often over there. But I do think that with this new schedule, they're going to be able to play some other teams. I'm not going to say easier teams, but some other teams, so they're not playing the same ones every single year. So I think that will help him. We'll see if he's kind of a Lance Leopold, Matt Campbell. I definitely think that's a strong possibility because, like I said, I like Kirk Cinetti a lot. I think that he's going to do some really good things. And man, he's not afraid of anybody. He's going after Juju Lewis right now, like the 5-star quarterback. He's going after him really, really aggressively. And it's like, people are saying, hey, Indiana doesn't do that. And Kirk Cinetti, he says, well, I do. So it doesn't matter where I'm at. I'm going after him.
I mean, that line of thinking is going to get you some wins right there. I mean, I would not be surprised if we see an upset victory in his first year or second year over someone big. We don't know who it'll be, but it's going to be tremendous to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely could. He has that ability and he has that motivation for his players.
Well, and I will say it's going to be fun to see what happens with Indiana and Michigan State, Michigan. And little fun fact, the last time a first-year head coach at Michigan beat Michigan State was Benny Osterbein. He was the last Michigan coach. Not even Bo Schembechler could beat Michigan State in his first year. Not even Lloyd Carr or any of those guys.
Yeah, that's wild. I didn't realize that stat. When was his first year?
I believe it was around the 40s. It was
Wow.
1948.
Wow, that's pretty
I,
impressive.
I could I could be off, but when I get a clip of this, I'm gonna tell the put in the comment section that, oh well, it was this year, that year.
There you go.
There we go. But it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. But I hope that Wink Martindale works out for Michigan, and and I hope to see Ohio State win the Big Ten. I want to see them in that drought. What can I say? I'm a sucker for teams that are looking to end a drought.
Well, and it's also parody, right? You love to see the parody. I mean, that's what people wanted to see when Michigan won in 2021. They wanted to see the parody. They wanted to see somebody else win. Now, 2 years later, after they've won it 3 years in a row, it's like, well, maybe somebody other than Michigan can win now. It's the parody. That's what people want.
I think we'll probably see some more parity with USC, Oregon, and Washington going into the Big Ten. I mean, we're not seeing that with UCLA football though. That's just not. I hope Deshaun Foster does well.
Yeah, I hope he does well too. I know the fans aren't super excited about the hire. I was following that pretty closely because I was very curious if they were going to hire a sitting head coach elsewhere. I didn't seem to be what they were going for, other than PJ Fleck, who he kind of turned it down.
Smart man. Because I mean, going from Minnesota to UCLA is a lateral move for college football. I mean, they could not read the room. They couldn't read the room with Chip Kelly the day after they lost to Cal, 36-7. They obviously couldn't read the room after bowl season. They missed their shot on Jonathan Smith and Jed Fish. I hope Foster does well, but
Yeah, I
don't.
hope he does as well. We'll see what can happen over there. The fan support isn't great. I know I've gotten a few comments from UCLA fans, and the fact that the stadium is off campus and that kind of stuff, it kind of hurts them. So we'll see. But in my mind, UCLA, they were always a nice add to the Big Ten, but I never felt like they were a top tier, going to contend and compete. Some people were relating them a little bit to Wisconsin when they first got in there. Kind of feel like that's a little bit of a slap in the face to Wisconsin. I feel like Wisconsin's a better program than that. But I would probably put them down near, like the Minnesotas and stuff like that, like you said.
Oh, I mean, right now in my little Big Ten mini helmet collection, the only team I got UCLA above is Purdue. That's it. They got shown.
Wow.
I only got delay so far.
Wow. Rutgers might turn some heads this year. We'll see, but they're returning quite a bit of talent. They did a good job last year, and they have a pretty favorable schedule. Don't be surprised if Rutgers gets 7 or 8 wins next year.
Oh, that'd be fantastic, especially for Greg Schiano in his second. And speaking of realignment, and if we see any more realignment, does the Big Ten try to get the Southeast?
Yeah, I mean the Big Ten is definitely going for the Floridas, Georgias, North Carolina, South Carolinas of the world down there. Not particularly those schools, but those states. I do think that we'll probably see Florida State added to the Big Ten at some point, and I do think that North Carolina wants to do that. But I also have heard lately that North Carolina is also leaning toward the SEC now, so they kind of get going back and forth. But I personally would like to see Georgia Tech make it in because Georgia is a really really good state to recruit from, and I think it'd be cool to have a school in there that you can kind of help recruiting with.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Georgia Tech got added to the Big Ten. That would be a great addition with the Atlanta TV market. And they seem to be doing all right academically. It'd be a big win there.
Well, and that's the difference between the SEC and the Big Ten right now. The SEC is prioritizing states and trying to get to more states in that way. The Big Ten is prioritizing markets, so you could actually see the Big Ten add both Florida and Miami. There's been talks about that because at the end of the day, they don't really care about what state a team is from. They just look at the market and say, how many TV viewers can we get with this school that we added?
Oh yeah, I mean Atlanta's a great TV market. I mean they got Cartoon Network over in Atlanta. They got all kinds of networks over there. But speaking of hot seat, as we were talking about earlier, Holtman, Chris Holtman, Jawan Howard, and I was looking on this link from Off Tackle Empire from SB Nation. They said that Fred Hoberg is on the hot seat. That's the thing that shocks me. Was he on
He
a hot seat?
was. He was at the end of last year, but he's not really on it now. The way he finished last year and them playing as well as they are this year, he's not on it anymore. Some people talk about Mike Woodson at Indiana. I don't think he's on it. Former player there. It's going to take a lot for them to fire him. I'll tell you a guy who is kind of a underrated hot seat guy is Kevin Willard at Maryland. There are a lot of expectations this season that they have not met those expectations, and the Maryland fans are not too happy with him.
Yeah, they've been giving him a stink eye. It's nothing like his Seton Hall days.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe he can get it going. Maybe he won't. Hopefully, but I guess we'll wait and see.
Well, and that loss to Ohio State kind of did him in as well. Ohio State been struggling. I think they were like one for their last 9 or something like that. And then you lose to Chris Holtman when there's like nobody in the arena because people were pretty much giving up on Ohio State at that point, and then you go into what, double overtime, and you lose to Ohio State. Yeah, the Maryland fans were not too happy after that game.
I don't blame him. I mean, I'm not expecting Final Four, but I'd at least expect a Sweet 16 run or something.
Well, yeah, and you think about who they have, right? Jameer Young is beloved. I mean, he is beloved by those Maryland fans, and he has basically been the offense for Maryland every year. I mean, he's been the starting point guard for them. So it's like, you almost feel like you've wasted this amazing talent that Jameer Young is, one of the best guards in the Big Ten, possibly the best guard in the Big Ten, and that's it's a tough pill to swallow for a proud fan base like Maryland.
Well, and I was looking at the bubble watch, and I know Michigan State is a bubble watch team. And their NCAA tourney streak dates back to 1997, 1998. Last time they missed the NCAA tourney was 96, 97. Do they make it back to March Madness again this year, or do they miss it entirely? What do you think?
I think that win over Illinois that they got, what was it, Saturday, that's going to really help them. And if they can get a win over Purdue or Northwestern, that's really going to solidify it. But I think they're pretty well in right now. The numbers love Michigan State. For people who aren't aware how bracketology and stuff like that works, Michigan State is really high up there in KenPom and net and all of those numbers. And a lot of people like to say, "Oh, those numbers don't matter," but to the committee when they choose these teams, they matter a lot to them. And so even if they don't matter to you, at the end of the day, they matter a lot to those committees. And Michigan State, they're still high up there, even though they haven't played their best basketball all season long. So as long as they don't drop games to, you know, Michigan and Ohio State and Indiana or something like that, they should be in the tournament.
Yeah, don't lose to the Scott Frost of college basketball. That's gonna bite you in the rear, Michigan.
Yeah, that would not be ideal.
That's a bad move there, Sparty. But I will say, Nebraska, now they've been fantastic at home, but they can't do well on the road. What can they win a road game to make it to March Madness? And if they make it to March Madness, can they win their first ever game NCAA tourney history, school history? Can they do that?
Yeah, so I was just looking at their schedule earlier today. Their road games left this season are Indiana, Ohio State, and Michigan. Those are three very beatable teams on the road. Now they're not going to do super well for, your resume, but they are going to be road wins that you can say, "Hey, look, we got these here and this is going to help us out." But there's really no more possible signature wins on this resume or on the schedule for them. So they really have to try and win at least two of those run games and win all of their home games. I think if they do that, I think they'll make it in, providing they also do well in the Big Ten tournament. But at the end of the day, the committee also loves road wins, and if you don't have those, that's going to be hard. I will say they did put up a very good fight at Illinois, going to overtime. I think it was 87-84 in that game, so only a 3-point game. I think that the committee
88,
will look
80,
fairly. What was it?
88, 80.
Okay, so yeah, I think they'll look favorably upon that one that they were able to take it to overtime and stuff like that.
Oh, and at the time of this filming, everyone, do not try to rewatch Michigan, Illinois. That's going on at this very moment. Do not, because I'm gonna tell you right now, it's too violent, especially for the children. Keep the children away from that game.
Well, you knew that was going to happen when you saw Michigan losing by 10 in the first half, and Michigan is at their best in the first half. So when the second half starts, it's like, oh no, yeah, you're right. There's 10 minutes left in that game, and Illinois has 70 points. Not good.
Well, in Iowa, I'm curious about them. How long is Fran McCaffrey gonna stay Iowa? What do you think?
There's been talks about this being his last year, and with his son Patrick moving on, I could definitely see that happen. He got the record for the winningest head coach in Iowa history and all that stuff, or what was it, thousandth win or something like that? Not thousandth, but anyway, he had some kind of milestone. I can't remember what it is right now, but he had that earlier this year. His son is graduating; he won't be there anymore, presumably. I don't know if he has a COVID year, but with all that going on, I could see Fran McCaffrey leaving. I don't think he's said anything publicly, but I could see him hanging it up here and retiring.
I wonder if he'll create a podcast of his own or go on ESPN or CBS afterward.
I would love a podcast with Fran McCaffrey reviewing games with referees because he's always yelling at those refs, and that would be a pretty entertaining podcast. I'd listen.
Oh man, that'll be fun. Like especially if he goes on like from the Hawkeye of the Storm, that'll be a fun
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Well, and Northwestern, they've been pretty impressive again, especially with Boo Buie and Chris Collins, head coach. Now, is Chris Collins going to be looked at as the Nets head coach elsewhere, or is he happy right where he's at Evanston?
Well, Northwestern's an interesting situation. A lot of times, these coaches who start doing well at Northwestern, obviously Chris Collins does not have the connection that a Pat Fitzgerald once had when he was at Northwestern, but for a lot of these guys, I feel like they kind of have a special relationship with the school. And from when you hear Chris Collins, I can't like give you an exact quote, but it's just like when you hear Chris Collins talk about Northwestern, it sounds like he has a real affinity for that school. So I mean, money always talks. You know, who knows if somebody throws enough money at him, they could give him to move on to someplace else. But I've always gotten the feeling that Chris Collins just really, really loves Northwestern and he loves the fan base and what he's been able to do these past couple of years and stuff like that. So I could see him sticking around for at least a few more years. And if he keeps doing it like this, you know, having good seasons, then I could see him eventually moving on to something bigger, but at least a few more years of good years and stuff like that for the school.
Well, if Louisville's thinking about getting rid of their head coach right now, Chris Collins is a good one to look out for.
And they should be thinking about getting rid of their head coach right now because it is not good for Louisville at all.
Well, and Purdue, now they've been looking dominant as usual in the regular season. But the question is, can it translate to the postseason, and can they be the next 2019 Virginia?
I think they can this year, and one of the reasons why is because of Lance Jones. Lance Jones transfer coming in this year, he adds an element to this team that it's not like a star power element. I mean, Purdue fans definitely see him as a star, but he's not going to be up for player of the year or anything like that. I mean, that's all Zach Edey, but he brings a lot to this team on the defensive end and with ball movement and the ability to score on the offensive end that they've been lacking. And Braden Smith has been much better with the ball lately this season than he was last year. So more calm, able to do those things. So we'll see what happens when we get into the tournament, but I like what I'm seeing them from now that I do think they'll be able to win at least a few games in the tournament this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, the last time they went to the national championship was in 1969 against UCLA during the reign of terror that UCLA put on college basketball at that time with John Wooden.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife is from Martinsville, Indiana, where John Wooden is from, and they they revere that man so much over there. They got a school named after him, all different kinds of things, and yeah, it's funny that connection is there with that in UCLA and all the IU fans that hate Purdue and everything. It's funny looking at sports and how those little connections can happen here and there.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if UCLA Purdue will be a rivalry, especially in basketball. Because, I mean, John Wooden's alma mater was Purdue, and he coached UCLA for a long time. So, I mean, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, it would be really interesting to see if something like that happens. I think that UCLA will probably have to get a little bit better than what they were this year, and we'll see what happens with Mick Cronin. There's some rumblings that he could be on the move after this season because he's not too happy with the way things are at UCLA. I don't always give a whole lot of credence to those rumors. Sometimes it's just fans talking, but at the end of the day, it could happen. And if it does, UCLA, they might be hiring a head basketball coach right after hiring a head football coach.
Yeah, I mean, they're not doing so hot with Mick Cronin right now. I mean, that's a far cry from the Final Four run in 2021.
And Mick Cronin is one of those guys that he has to have guys who believe and who are built into the system and willing to run it at all costs. And I think this year he has some really talented guys who would rather win off their talent than necessarily win off the system, which is not always a bad thing. But, Mick Cronin, he wants his guys to win off the system. And I just don't think it's been the best meshing so far this year.
You think like a big run in the conference tournament can save him and then like make a surprise, if they surprisingly get added to the March Madness, especially if they possibly win their conference tournament, steal a bid from somebody. You think that could save his job?
I mean, possibly. There were some Ohio State fans that felt like what happened last year with Ohio State and Chris Holtman winning 3 tournament games or conference tournament games. That's what saved him last year. So they didn't even make the NCAA tournament. They still finished 16 and 19 or something like that. So um, we'll see. I don't think that UCLA is in that dire of constraints. So I'm hesitant to believe UCLA will move on from him just after this season. But who knows? Crazier things have happened.
That is true, especially in the world of college football and college basketball and the sports world as a whole.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Well, well, and I noticed that Andy Enfield and USC, they're 9-15. That's bad. You can't be doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I questioned when Bronny James went there before, and I'm kind of double questioning that now. And I'm wondering, he's just a kid. Bronny James, sorry.
That's okay.
I mean, he's just a kid. He's just trying to do his best and uh, make things happen and be a good ball player. But at the end of the day, his name carries a lot of weight, and when he's playing on that team and things like that, it can affect the culture of the team and can kind of hurt what's going on. Again, I don't think it's Bronny James's fault personally, but just kind of the semantics of what goes on around having LeBron James' son on your team and him trying to get to the NBA after 1 year, that kind of stuff. I mean, LeBron's been very vocal in the past about wanting to play with his son and trying to get him to the NBA and that kind of stuff. So we'll see. But yeah, it's not been pretty for USC so far this year.
I wonder if it could be like Michael Porter when he was at Missouri, and Missouri had that losing record the 1 year he was there.
Yeah, I mean, there are some schools that they aren't patient with it, or if they just see the culture going downhill, they move on from them. I don't know. I don't follow USC closely enough to see, what um, the the pattern has been in the past for firing and coaches and things like that to be able to give a strong argument. But you're right. There are some schools out there that just one bad year and you can move on from them.
Yeah, especially in Big Ten country and SEC country where everybody kind of throws the baby out with the bathwater big time.
In in those countries, they pay a lot of money, and so when these boosters are paying a lot of money and they want the best coaches and all that stuff, a losing season doesn't seem acceptable, especially when you're paying them that much money. But the the way things are going nowadays, basically everybody in the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be making a lot of money. So it's almost like you don't look at all the other conferences, you look at your conference and say, how well is our guy being paid compared to other coaches? So
That's true. I mean, the best job in the world is a fired college football head coach.
yes, Jimbo Fisher is doing pretty well, I assume.
Oh, he's smoking that cigar in a hot tub right here and now.
Yeah, that's what I'd be doing.
I mean, I just wonder like if we'll see him on Pat McAfee or Joe Rogan. That'll be fun.
That would be really funny if that happened.
But it's gonna be interesting to see what happens in the college basketball world and college football world, especially in Big Ten country. And curious to see what happens with Michigan State. It's gonna be a wild ride with the Spartans. And you got an upcoming show tonight, I believe. You're doing the coaching carousel. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all the different coaches. It's kind of crazy. There's been 31 coaches who have been retained in the Big Ten. There's 23 new head coaches and coordinators in the Big Ten this year. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different things going on. I think only 3 or 4, maybe 5 schools off the top of my head: Illinois, Purdue, Oregon. Those are the 3 off the top of my head that retained all of their coordinators and their head coach. So it's not been something that's happened with everyone in the Big Ten this year, and I anticipate it's only going to get crazier. We look at the transfer portal and say, oh, look, all of these coaches all of these players who've entered. Then when we look at the coaching carousel, we probably need to look and say, look at all these coaches that moved on, or look at all these coaches that were fired because if they're not doing well enough, out of here.
But I will say that playoff field, it's gonna be fun to see what happens. But I've got a feeling it's gonna be a lot of SEC teams and a lot of Big Ten teams. There's only going to be that one or two ACC teams or that one or two Big 12 teams.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the most we'll get is two ACC teams, but at least in football, I can't see more than one Big 12 team getting in there. You look at the Big 12 this year, and there's not really any contenders coming out of there. So your kind of sleeper pick or whatever you want to call it is kind of be probably whoever wins the Big 12, and then if Clemson has a good year, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt from the ACC and get in there. If Florida State does, and they don't win the conference, they might get the benefit of the doubt. But I tend to believe you're right. I tend to believe that those 9 spots that aren't the Group of 5, ACC or Big 12 conference champions, I think most of those 9 are going to be from the Big 10 and the SEC.
Especially if you're in the SEC title game or the Big Ten title game. So it's basically if you clinch a spot in either one of those conference title games, you're in the playoffs, win, lose, or draw. Well, win or lose.
Right. Yeah. No, I've been listening to some Michigan fans talk about, well, what if we go 9-3? Are we gonna get into the college football playoffs? It's like, heck yeah, you are. Have you seen your schedule? Your schedule's really tough. If you only lose 3 games, you're getting in the college football playoffs because at the end of the day, you're in the Big Ten. You're playing a really tough schedule, and you just came off winning the national championship last year. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and you're going to be in there. They might even get in there if they lose 4 games.
I'm excited about that Michigan Texas game, but I hope one of these years we see Michigan Notre Dame go back on an annual basis. But I got a feeling we'll see it sooner than 2033 because NBC is connected with Notre Dame and the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's been talks about the Big Ten kind of like shutting Notre Dame out from playing any of their teams
That's
until
dumb.
they join
Dumb.
the conference or something like that. I'm not really in favor of that either, but at the same time, I kind of look at Notre Dame and I'm like, would you just join a conference already? Like, I'm glad you had this tradition for years and years and years, but just join a conference. Join the one that has all your rivals in it, and you can play them and have fun and win a conference championship someday. Just join a conference. It's not that bad. Everybody else is doing it. Like peer pressure.
Well, and as we wrap up episode 27 of the Jacksonian with JR, host of the Big Ten Huddle, for those who want to get some Big Ten insider knowledge on football, basketball, all kinds of stuff like realignment, where can they find you?
Yeah, the Big Ten Huddle, mostly on Twitter right now. It's just me running the stuff, so it's hard to run it on every single platform. But I am going to try to be posting more on Instagram and TikTok and places like that as well. And then Big Banter Sports, BigBanterSports.com is where you can find kind of the overarching umbrella of our show and the many other shows of Big Ten teams there as well.
Well, and as we wrap up episode 27 of the Jacksonian, you can also check me out on youtube.com at JacksonJohnson979. Give me a follow on Jackson09960335 on Twitter and on Instagram threads at JacksonJohnson543908. Till the next episode of Jacksonian, this is Jackson Johnson, your host, wishing you all good night, sleep well, stay